In this particular subject, we're going to be talking about something I think is very, very important. It's people talk about one of the reasons that their marriage failed is because they just grew apart. And I want to take a look at growing together versus growing apart and how important that is and how we can achieve that. I want to set a preliminary thought to begin with, and that is that two things. One is that I have the responsibility for change. I should go into any relationship knowing that I'm with now another person and changes are going to have to be made. You shouldn't go into a relationship thinking that you're all set and there's nothing that you need to do and everything's ready to go. I think you just need to realize that, again, we're with another person and change is probably going to have to take place. And to be part of that, to not resist that, but to be a part of that. The second thing, which I think is really key and something that I've learned this year, I have a friend at work, Del Baker, and one of the things he's really impressed upon me is, number one, I know a little bit about his life and I know the struggles that he's come through. And there's a place in a, he did a book, and there's a place in this book that he wrote. It's a thing called, the book is called Daily Rituals, and it's just a little devotional every day for people that are in recovery. And one of the things he said that really touched me was in one of these daily entries, he talked to, knowing his background, he talked about that he just dreamed of having the life that he has today. He just used to dream about it. Couldn't imagine having a life where he was successful and where he showed up for work and that he was clear of mind and that he had finances and a future and a good job and all that kind of stuff. He said, I just dreamed of that. And that's where he is today. And one of the ways that became accomplished was that Dell didn't make grandiose future plans. He started looking at his life on a daily basis. Like, what can I change today? And so Dell left that impression upon me, and it's been a really helpful thing in life is that Dell said, you are who you are daily. So I think that concept of daily change fits in very well, because some of the things that we want to accomplish are just better bitten off in small pieces. Like, I think everybody wants to lose weight. And I think most people would like to be in better shape, so exercise. Most people would like to eat healthier instead of eating possibly stuff that they know is not good for them. Most people would like to have a better financial aspect on their lives. Most people would like to have a better relationship with their loved ones. And most people, I think, would like to consider God in their lives and have a better relationship with Him. So rather than making these grandiose plans for someday in the future, I'm going to do whatever, I think it's much better to look at all of those particular things as how do I accomplish those on a daily basis. So let's step now into that aspect of, we're talking about growing together. We're talking about growing together versus growing apart. And let's look at it as change, and let's look at it as change on a daily basis. It's interesting to me that we look at growing apart as something that happens later on in our marriage. Like, we had it together to begin with, but now later on in our marriage, we lost this love and we started growing apart. I had a friend at work that was talking about something I would have never picked up on. As he was talking about that he went to a wedding and he noticed that the bride and groom went up, they got married, they came down the aisle, and she went this direction to be with her friends, and he went this direction to be with his friends. And my friend was newly married, and he just said, we would have never done that. My wife and I would have gone off to meet with these people together. But here he is, this couple just got married, and boom, they're going different directions right off the bat. So I think it blows holes through the assumption that I had this great relationship in the beginning, and that automatically when we were young and we just got married, that we had this togetherness, but now that we don't. Possibly we really didn't have this intimacy. Like later on that evening, they had a degree of intimacy, but we didn't have this particular intimacy of learning how to communicate and be together from the very beginning. I think that possibly might be a fallacy. So, how do we establish closeness? I want to give the only example I know, the only suggestion I know, and that's that it came from my grandparents. That one of the things they did every evening is that they took a half hour before they went to bed and they read something together. Why read something? Why not just chat and talk? Because a lot of times a chat and a talk just becomes this unfocused thing that becomes boring and that you lose interest in because nothing ever happens. There's no goal, no focus, no anything. But they would get a book, they would choose Better Homes and Gardens, they would choose a current novel, they would choose something related to history, they would choose they weren't, I don't think, necessarily religious people, but they could have chosen to read the Bible together a little bit each night, which I think is a terrific idea. But the basic concept they had was that they would take a half hour each night and they would read together. And again, reading establishes a focus. You can put a bookmark in it the night before and come back and pick up where you left off. It's not random, it's a particular subject matter. And I would suggest getting, as you begin this, I would suggest getting like 6 books or 6 different ideas so that when you and your wife sit down and start talking about this concept, you have plenty of choices to work from. And for them, it was not only something that they could build upon and understand each other's feelings about in reading and discussing, but there was an education that came out of it as well. They were well-read people. They had a good understanding of whatever it was they had read and talked about. And again, they had that focus. So in relation to reading together, I just think it's really interesting in the book of Ephesians chapter 5, where it talks about husband and wife relationships, that it says that the husband is supposed to wash his wife in the water of the word. That sounds like a lot of religious talk. What does that mean? It means that we come out of a world daily where there's coarse jokes, where there's discouraging news, where there's conflict, fighting, wars, all that kind of stuff, that maybe a grumpy boss, discouraging family events. We come out of that kind of an environment on a daily basis, and we come to this place where the Bible is called the good book. And so a husband would meet with his wife, and he would read to her out of the Bible, which is a book that has encouraging things in it. It gives me insights on how to have a better relationship with God and how much he loves and cares for me. And it gives me practical advice about how to handle my day-to-day aspects of my life, as well as assuring me that God is with me. It's just a really positive book, and that washing concept means I'm being cleansed from the daily events that tend to drag me down. So it's interesting to me that Paul recommends this very thing, reading to your wife. And in this, I would recommend this, that you don't read to her and tell her what she's supposed to believe. I would recommend that you read together and that you would listen to her and understand what she thinks about it. Get a better idea of what her thoughts and feelings are on it, so that you can figure out together maybe what it's truly saying and how you guys can change, both of you. But I just wouldn't make it a teaching time where you're telling her what she should think and believe, but a time of listening instead. So let's wrap this up. What's the takeaway here? The takeaway is that I need to change when I go into a relationship. I need to expect that change is going to be just a part of the deal. It's somebody else I'm with. Change is going to be a part of it. I need to bite off change in realistic sizes. Again, I think that people make these New Year's resolutions that never come to pass because it's going to be sometime in the future, or the year's a big, long section of time, and somewhere in that I'm going to fit all these changes. I agree with Dell. You are who you are on a daily basis. So look at it as, what am I doing today? And then the other aspect is, I just believe that change is going to be hard. You're cutting your way through a path that you haven't been through before. Possibly you don't have anybody in your family that's ever done this reading together as a husband and wife. Maybe nobody that you know has ever done it, nobody in your community, in your church or whatever. And so you're kind of cutting this path alone. And again, that's kind of a lonely place to be, and it probably would be an aspect where you would even consider giving up. I encourage you, obviously, not to do that. So I think those are the things that you will face when you start to look at how to be closer instead of farther apart. Again, I think that's a fallacy to say that you had it to begin with. This is something you're going to have to develop and work on, but I think it's good work to do. Again, my name is Ken Conley. I'm the author of a book called The Forgotten Option, and everything we teach and do, we want to encourage you in your marriage and encourage stuff like communication, like we're talking about. We want you to stay together. We don't want marriages to end up in divorces. And so that's what we're all about, is encouraging people to stay in their marriage and to grow and to have the kind of marriage that they, like Dell dreamed about his life, to have the kind of marriage that they always dreamed of. Thanks for watching.